Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. The Caring Generation focuses on the conversation of caring, giving us permission to talk about aging, the challenges of caregiving, and everything in between. It's no surprise that needing care or becoming a caregiver changes everything. The Caring Generation is here to guide you along the journey to let you know that you're not alone. You are in exactly the right place to share stories and learn about caregiving programs and resources to help you and your loved ones plan for what's ahead. Invite your parents, spouses, family, friends, colleagues, coworkers, and everyone you know to listen to the show, available on podcast apps worldwide. If you have a question or an idea for a future program, share your idea with me by commenting on social media posts on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com, click on the Contact Me button, and fill out my caregiver survey. This week's episode is number 172, and it's called Doing the Best You Can with What You've Got. People who are caregivers usually have very long to-do lists. Even if you're not a caregiver, you may have a very long to-do list. If you've been caring for an aging parent or multiple family members, maybe you're also raising children, caring for a grandparent, or caring for an aging parent and your spouse. You know that time and resources are very limited, including your energy. This is why many caregivers find themselves choosing between spending time with children versus time caring for a sick parent or spouse versus doing a lot of other things you would rather be doing. There are times when you have to make a choice between A and B, and when neither option feels like a good choice. You're just so stressed out. So during this week's program, we'll talk about how to do the best you can, even if you're not sure what doing the best thing means or the right thing means. I'll share a few examples of common decisions that caregivers have to make. And then in the second half of the program, we'll talk more about ways to do the best that you can with what you have so that in the future, in years down the road, you're not filled with regret about all of those things you wanted to do, but you didn't think you could. Maybe you let opportunities slip through your fingers. So let's start with doing the best you can with the obvious factors: limited time and resources. We all have these issues. There's only 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. So think about this. As a caregiver, how much time do you actually spend each week caring for grandpa, grandma, mom or dad, siblings, a spouse, your children, or somebody else? My suggestion would be to log that time and see if it's more or less than what you think it is. Because until we start to track things on paper, until we start to write things down, sometimes we're thinking, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that much time. Or maybe it's less time than you think and you're just stressed out. So it's important to start tracking information on paper so that you can evaluate doing the best you can. Now, everybody thinks, gosh, it would be so nice to get paid for caring for my elderly parents. Well, yes, it would. It would be nice if you could just send a bill for the time that you spend weekly in caregiving activities. But unless you have a formal, written, notarized caregiving agreement with a family member, or unless the state where you live has a Medicaid program that pays family caregivers, this is a very unlikely scenario. So here's the next step. You've written down the amount of time that you're actually spending caregiving, whether it's parents, children, someone else. Next, make a list of what I call resources and constraints so that you know what you have to work with. A constraint is defined as it's a limitation or it's a restriction that makes doing something not possible. So let's say that you have 1 week of vacation every year and you spend that time at your house fixing up things, and you're invited to go somewhere else, and you have to say no because you've already used that week of vacation. So it's this constraint that makes doing something else not possible. So here's another example. A constraint might be having $20 to spend on groceries today when the items you really need cost $40. So you're having to decide between product A and product B and what you really, really need and things that maybe aren't so necessary. Resources and constraints are also things like time and money. Transportation can be a limited resource if you don't have a vehicle and you rely on public transportation. You can't just decide at a whim that you're going to go somewhere because you rely on a bus schedule or a train schedule. On the other hand, another example, real life example, is taking or getting a parent to a doctor's appointment, which if you're a caregiver, you know this can be a major project that other people have no idea. When I was a care manager, there were times when my staff would arrange paid, accessible wheelchair transportation for my clients to a doctor appointment because we didn't have the ability to go to the client's home and put them in a wheelchair and get them to the car and then put the wheelchair in the car or transport them in the wheelchair. That was a constraint. So when we did this to save time, we would add on a paid caregiver to actually go to the client's home and meet the transportation and accompany the client to the doctor's office. So then me or my staff would meet the client and the caregiver at the appointment to be more time efficient. So if you're a caregiver, this might be something that you want to consider because the time to drive to your parents' home, organize the transportation, the drive time to the doctor's appointment, the time for the appointment, the time after the appointment, it can really put a dent in your available time. Then there's all these things that can go wrong. Things like late transportation or transportation that doesn't show up. Maybe you did schedule a caregiver to go with your parent. They don't show up or they're late. Maybe mom or dad forgot they had an appointment, or they're not ready when it's time to leave because they're very slow in getting ready and getting out the door. Or maybe mom or dad simply says, you know what, I'm not going today. So until you're a caregiver in this situation with all these little scheduled things that have to be managed, you may not realize what it really takes to get things done. And if you have done this, you know, and that is where all this time pressure is coming on you, where you're thinking, I just can't do this anymore. What's the right thing to do? So let's go to example number 2. If your parent lives in an assisted living community or in a nursing home, and you need to get them to a doctor appointment, there is paperwork from the community that has to go with you. It's called a face sheet and a medication list. And the reason that this has to go to the appointment is any changes have to be signed by the doctor because the assisted living community just can't do things that you tell them that are medically related. So in this case, you've got that time to arrange, then you've got paperwork from the community. So if you're a caregiver who has to take time off work, this really is a burden. And then let's look at the money-related issues. So you've got the expense of paid transportation, hiring a caregiver who might either drive your parent to the appointment or accompany them to save you time. If there's a visit copay, you've got that. You've got costs for prescriptions. If you have to take a day off work, there's a cost to that, right? You're cutting into your time off or your vacation time. And then let's talk about other constraints, which can be your parents' physical health or their mental abilities, which eventually is going to lead to more and more time for caregivers to help out in the future. And as you know, you add time over here in one part of your life, that means that you have less time to do anything else. And I hear from so many caregivers who have young children saying, oh, I have 3 children and I'm having another one, but I'm caring for my aging parents and I have absolutely no time to spend with my kids. There is a point where you've got to think about doing the right thing for everyone, not only your aging parents. The right thing for you, the right thing for your children, the right thing for your marriage, the right thing for your family, your career, everything. Employment, time with your spouse, children, friends, time for yourself. These are all limited resources and constraints, right? So as you make this list of resources and constraints, also think about what you want your caregiving situation to look like. Do you want more time for yourself or more time with your children? Might the solution be a paid caregiver or finding other services for the person who needs care so that you're not doing everything? So many caregivers think that they're the only ones that can do this or that they have to be the only ones that can do that. And that type of limited thinking is going to get you into trouble in the long run because you may end up giving up a lot of aspects of your life and your time that you really can't get back. Marriages are destroyed because of caring for aging parents. Careers are lost, and you can't gain back that experience, that job experience, that income. And then you look back and you think, oh, I should have never, ever done that. So creating this list, your wish list, can help you look at the situation objectively. And let's just take a step back. When you first became a caregiver, was there an assumption by you or the person that you care for that you would do everything, no matter how much time and effort it took? Did you just jump in and offer to help without any discussion of what this looks like a year from now or 3 years from now or 5 years from now? If there was no discussion about this, unfortunately, your situation mirrors many other caregiving situations. Most caregivers begin from this basis of being naive because at the time, you're doing the best you can do with the knowledge that you have. The problem is you have a huge knowledge gap about what being a caregiver means, what this time commitment means, how it's going to change your life. And I use the word naive with the utmost kindness and respect because you cannot possibly plan for things that you don't know are going to happen. And my experience in 20 years is that most caregivers have no idea what they've committed to until down the road when time passes and the caregiver is exhausted and burned out. I've been there myself. And when you're at that point, you think, I don't have any other choice. There's nobody else that's going to do this. I don't know what to do. Your brain is just on overload and you cannot think of solutions. So today we're here to talk about solutions and to really jar your brain into thinking that there can be a different way. That is a huge gap for caregivers because caregivers feel like they're stuck and there are no choices. I'm telling you, there are choices. There are just hard choices and hard consequences to face from those choices. So, in this situation of doing the best you can, you have to accept responsibility for how you got to where you are today. Accept responsibility for your participation and things that you did and did not know, which are not your fault. If you didn't know that you needed to set parameters or boundaries or limits around care activities, you can't blame yourself for that. It was just something that you didn't know. You did the best at the time with the knowledge and experience that you have. And just to say this again, being a caregiver can be challenging because many caregivers feel they don't have a choice due to family, to culture, to duty and responsibility. But when you look around, who else is stepping in? Why are you only the single one person doing anything? Does everybody else not feel like family culture is important, duty is important, or responsibility is important? No, they probably do, but their duty and responsibility may be to their marriage or their children, not to giving up their life to care for a parent. So it's where you place your priorities. And even when caregivers get physically or emotionally worn out or sick, many of you keep going, again, because you think that there's no other choice. There's a point where it's important to take a day off to think about the caregiving situation. And maybe you need to take a few days off or a week off to go back and think about why there wasn't a conversation when all this started. Whether you became too helpful, which made your parents more dependent on you or your spouse more dependent on you. In a sense, you've got to become a problem solver and do the best you can at this to rebalance your life. This doing the best means always taking the high road. Be kind, be considerate, especially when you're exhausted or you might feel frustrated or impatient. And this means avoiding criticism of other people, yourself, because we're usually critical or we fixate on things that we maybe don't like in ourselves that we see in other people. There's no benefit to allowing yourself to be sucked into very negative or unproductive behaviors. And that's a thing that you have to recognize and catch in yourself. Sometimes it just becomes such a habit that we do it all the time. And we spin and spin and spin in this angry mode, and we're only hurting ourselves. So instead of solving a problem, you're focusing on all these negative things, which really can lead to more problems. And so it is possible with effort to be kind to everybody, no matter whether you are having a good day or a bad day. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come back to talking more about having limited resources and what happens when caregiving situations turn out to be a lot more work than you expected. I'm Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. Visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com, to access my online caregiving program, How to Care for Aging Parents. That course alone can shortcut your learning curve and eliminate all of these things that you don't know that you don't know. There are now also over 170 episodes of this Caring Generation podcast answering questions that caregivers ask, going now into its 8th year. On my website, my caregiver library, there's articles there. There's also a link to my online support group on Facebook. It's called the Caregiving Trap. You can request to join. Over 800 videos on my YouTube channel. Stay with me. I'll be right back, and we will share more tips on how to manage through situations that you can't even imagine might happen. This is Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. Remember to go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com. There is so much helpful information there, hope and support to help caregivers who are new at this and even caregivers who have been doing this for some time that are facing situations that you may not know how to manage. So let's talk about the next step in this process of listing restraints and resources and what you would like to have happen as a caregiver. So this next step is being bluntly honest with yourself about what you want and how you want the situation to be, regardless of the pressures that other people are putting on you. And so there's this process of getting really clear about what you want. And we're going to look at a worst case scenario and then another common example. So let's say your dream is replacing you as the caregiver with a different option, maybe a paid caregiver or placing a parent in a care community. Because honestly, you've done the best you can under the circumstances. A lot of areas of your life are suffering, and it's just time to honestly move on with your life. So, if getting clear on what you want and the solution to this is reducing caregiving hours, then you've got to problem solve so that you can be responsible and thoughtful about creating a transition. So let's say that it really is to the point where your parent can't live alone, they can't bathe or dress, not taking their medications, can't drive a car, grocery shop, or cook. Maybe they've got some memory loss going on. So in this case, there's a lot of daily needs to be managed, and so the best option is either bring a paid caregiver into the home for 24 hours a day or move them. Now, if you're in a fortunate situation and your parents have an unlimited supply of money and mom or dad want to stay at home, you can actually hire caregivers and hire a care manager who is like a supervisor to supervise the caregivers and deal with everything so that you get your life back as a son or a daughter. And you can even do this as a spouse if money exists. That's obviously the ideal situation. Most people don't have that kind of money because they didn't plan for it. Your parents never thought they were going to be sick. And if they did, they thought you were going to be the caregiver forever. So when you're looking at the solution, you got to get a plan made. You've got to do your research before you present options to your parent and a spouse about you not being the caregiver. So let's say a parent has all these needs and there's no money. There's just no money to pay for care. Then you have to investigate Medicaid or a version of this in your state. It can be called different things: long-term care support services, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, Medicaid 1115. You have to investigate this. So basically, on either end, you have money, you don't have money. You got to do the research to figure out what the options are. And then you have to go talk to your parent about it. So in some cases, if there's money, you can just figure out the options. If there's not money, there's a Medicaid application that has to be completed. And if you're not that power of attorney, you may not have access to information about your parents' health or their income. So you cannot maybe know for certainty that they will qualify. So you're going to have this discussion. And talking to parents about change can be a little bit of a challenge if you're not used to having difficult conversations, or if you don't do well with conflict, or if you know you're going to feel guilty. So the step is to be very kind and tell the truth about your feelings. This is about you. This is not about what your parents are doing to you. Because if you phrase it in that manner, you made me be your caregiver. If you blame them for everything, this conversation is not going to go well. So when you think about it, this conversation is kind of like breaking up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or ending a relationship with a friend. You don't want to have it be this knockdown, drag-out fight. You want to do it in the best manner possibly so that everybody feels the best that they can, even though it's a bad situation. I will tell you, your parent is going to feel rejected. They're going to feel like you don't want to care for them. They're going to feel like you don't have time. And honestly, you don't. And that is okay. So the way that you do this is to place the responsibility for stepping in to do too much on yourself as the caregiver. You should have had the conversation when this started to be clear about your time commitment, your boundaries, all of that. You didn't, and now you're in this situation. So now you're having that conversation, which is very logical. So how do you go through this? Well, here it goes. Mom or Dad, I know that we didn't talk about caregiving and me being a caregiver for you and all of your care needs when this started 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Mom or Dad, I've been doing everything I can to help, and I admit I have taken on too much. It's causing problems with my career, my marriage. I feel like I'm failing with my children, and my health is bad. I've done the best that I can do. And so what I've done is I've investigated options for you to receive in-home care or go to a care community, and I want to share this information with you. I realize that this conversation may be coming out of the blue because maybe I never mentioned this before. And again, that's my fault. I'm sorry. I hope you're going to consider these options, A, B, and C, so that I can help you make the adjustment as my timeline to not be your caregiver or my timeline to not be so involved is no more than 8 to 12 weeks. So we have a very small window of time to make a decision. Now, your parent may just bite back and say, you know what, I don't care, I don't need your help, I'm not going to do any of this. Then you say, okay, that is your choice. Then, if you're ready to take over everything, I'm out. But if you want my help, I will help you over the 8 next 8 to 12 weeks. Why don't you think about it for a few days and get back to me? So when you think about this, again, you've got to put yourself in that place of rejection. The boyfriend or girlfriend who got rejected, the person who didn't get the job. Because if you put yourself in that place, in the place of your parent, this conversation may be a total shock if you've never expressed concern before. Mom or dad may need time to adjust to the fact that this situation has to change. It's kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid to get this very uncomfortable conversation out on the table. Now, some caregivers might bring up the topic a little bit early before investigating options, saying, hey, mom or dad, I just want you to know, heads up, I'm going to start investigating other options because I'm not sure that I can continue to do everything that I'm doing. Once I have this information, then I will talk to you about it. So there's pros and cons of this. If you've always been straight up with your parents and you prefer people to be straight up with you, they may appreciate the early notice and want to be involved in that process of investigation. Or they may attempt to make you feel guilty because you're looking at other options. They might be worried because they feel like they don't have enough information. So the thing here is, your parent the best and your relationship. Would they prefer to be told bad news that might be concerning without having a solution right there? Or is it better to have the discussion and be prepared to review all of the options at once? These are very difficult situations. So doing the best you can with the knowledge and resources that you have, doing your homework to figure out options before you have these discussions is the way forward. So let's talk about making decisions. And this is, again, on the guise of doing the best you can with the information that you have. Let's say that you are the medical power of attorney and financial power of attorney for a parent. And there's a decision on the table to have surgery. And it could be surgery for anything, right? A broken hip, maybe heart surgery, maybe surgery to have a wound repaired, whatever it is. You talk to the doctors, you go through all the options, you think you have all the information you need, and for whatever reason, your parent has a surgery and they are much worse than they were before the surgery. And now they need a lot more help, and they may not be able to return home and live independently. And as that caregiver, you're thinking, oh my gosh, we should have never did the surgery. Maybe you learned some information after the surgery that would have been really helpful for you to have before the surgery, because if you had that information, maybe you would have decided not to have the surgery, that the risks were too much. As this caregiver, it's very heartbreaking to see your parents' health get worse, to see them, go downhill. And there was probably a hope that this situation would have just made everything so much better. But there is a point for all of us, our aging parents, us as children who are going to age, where medical treatments may not improve the situation. You can go through the motions and do this, but it's not going to make the situation any better. So there's this decision of, well, what if we don't do this? What's the situation going to be like? Is it going to be better or worse? So you do the best under the circumstances that you have. And caregiving, again, it's just difficult. So the way that you look at these situations can be, well, we did the best that we have. Now we have a new situation that we have to adjust to. And sometimes not making a decision or procrastinating can cause other problems, right? So your parent had the surgery. It didn't work out. They're living at home. It's a risky situation. And because you made a not so good decision about the surgery, or you made a decision based on facts you didn't have, now you're hesitating to do anything else because you think it's going to be too stressful for your parents. But it's risky for them to be home. What if they fall? What if they break a hip? What if something else happens? So in any situation, there's a point where we can wait too long to do something, right? Because maybe you feel guilty about talking to your parents about the fact that they have to move out of their home. And it's difficult for everybody. Well, there's that point again, going back to where you got to have the difficult conversations. You got to make decisions between A and B. No choice may be good, but there's nothing else that you can do. So it's the idea of writing down the pros and cons and making those difficult decisions and not second guessing it, trying to make the best of what you can do with the information you have. And that really is the way to gain confidence and experience in decision making. As you go through that process, continually ask yourself, am I doing the best that I can? Do I have all the information I need? Am I putting in sufficient effort? Because whether you make a good choice or a bad choice, there's a cost to both. There's a cost to good choices, right? And in time, as you go through this in life, you're going to gain the experience to see these gaps between a well thought out decision and maybe a decision where you didn't have enough information. So when these happen, it's best to seek out some experts, seek out people who have been through this so that maybe you can gain the information that you need to make the right decisions. It's also important to realize that our loved ones, they're also doing the best they can with what they have. If they are 90 years old and they have a lot of health problems and they're exhausted all the time and they don't feel good, honestly, maybe just getting out of bed in the morning is a hard thing to do. So just as caregivers have this suitcase full of life experiences, so do the people that we care for. Some people never get over their past mistakes. They carry regret with them for years. So rather than put yourself in this position of, I made a mistake and I hate myself for it, put yourself in a position of gaining a bigger perspective about all the moving parts and pieces of the role of being a caregiver and all the decisions that have to be made. And here's a way that you can do this. Go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com. There is an online program for caregivers called Caring for Aging Parents. And this information does apply whether you're caring for an aging parent, a spouse, or yourself. The level of detail in this online program is extensive because it's based off my daily experience over a 20-year period as a care manager and a professional fiduciary. I'm just not somebody talking on a podcast giving you, faulty recommendations or doing videos that I have no basis for providing the information for. I was blessed to have the crazy benefit of experiencing once-in-a-lifetime situations that gave me significant insight into problem solving. So if you're in any uncertain situation and you're looking for guidance, check out this online program. There's no cost, and you may find solutions to issues that you're experiencing if you are open-minded. If you take the initiative to learn, to consider opposite perspectives, and to be open to new experiences. That's one of the best things anybody can do for themselves in any area of life, whether you're a caregiver or not. Now, you might say, well, I have no time, I'm too busy. Are you too busy to solve your problems? Are you too busy to make your life better? Honestly, there's a million excuses not to do anything. There's a million excuses to procrastinate and not make decisions. But there's also a million reasons on the other side to do the opposite, to plan and to act by doing the best you can with the information that you have and the information you can seek out. The beauty is you get to choose which side of the fence you want to be on. And as a caregiver, this isn't easy because you are dealing with other people's lives. You also want to realize that your life is just as valuable as the person you care for. It's as valuable as the family members who might judge you for doing one thing or another, or those that can't help out. They're placing a value on your life. Why shouldn't you place a value on your life? If you're a young caregiver, you have a lot of life in front of you. And the actions that you take early in your life, in your 20s and your 30s, are going to set the course for the rest of your life. Did you choose to go to college? Did you choose to pursue a career, get married, give up your job to care for aging parents? You cannot get that time back, and you cannot get those decisions back. All of these are big choices with lifelong effects. Your parents or the person that you care for, if they're older, already made their decisions. These decisions, as you can see, are playing out in the circumstances of their lives today. So if you want a career and you need more education or experience, don't wait. Find a way to get that education and experience. If you're a caregiver and you want more time for yourself so that you can marry and have children, Do it. Don't wait. Don't look back in that rearview mirror 6 months or 12 months or 5 years from now saying, I made a big mistake. And most of all, be kind. Consider that everybody that you meet, regardless of what you know about them, has their own daily struggles and challenges. So for this reason, do your best to be kind in all of your interactions, just as you would want somebody to be kind to you. I thank you so much for being here and continuing to ask questions for these weekly programs. Please check out the other 170 episodes of this podcast. Share this podcast with the people that you care for, your family members, everybody that you know who is going through this, so that we can extend the support and the education and the love out there. There are so many caregivers looking for hope, help, and support. I'm Pamela D Wilson. I am a caregiving expert. You are with me on the Caring Generation podcast. Please check out my website, PamelaDWilson.com. There is so much help, hope, and support there. I look forward to being with all of you again soon. God bless you all. I'm sending love and light to everybody. Sleep well tonight. Have a fabulous day tomorrow. And enjoy each day until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for The Caring Generation with host Pamela D. Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D. Wilson's The Caring Generation.